Edy Nathan says grief can be an unexpected ally that allows people to grow and learn from their losses. Don't go away, because when we come back, we talk to Edy Nathan, the author of It's Grief, the Dance of Self-Discovery Through Trauma and Loss. If you're just joining us, welcome to the Writers Corner live show. I'm your host, Bridgetti Banda from Cape Town in South Africa. And in today's show, we're going to be talking to Edy Nathan. She's the author of a book called It's Grief, the Dance of Self-Discovery Through Trauma and Loss. And my goodness, what an appropriate title and topic for the times that we live in. But first of all, let me say hello to my friend and co-host Mary Elizabeth Jackson, who is also a special needs and disabilities advocate and the author of the award-winning Poolicious children's book series. She lives in Nashville in the USA. So if you're watching us live on the replay, if you're on Facebook, on Twitter, on Periscope, on LinkedIn, a huge big warm welcome to you. And hello, Mary, how are you?
Hi, it is crazy times, isn't it? I know weather's crazy. Schools are starting back in parts of our country and parts that, well, you guys are still in school right now, but sort of out of school. And, yes, her book is very prevalent for right now. And, wow, we just we just wish, I don't know, everything was lifted and we could go back to having some normalcy and just, I don't know, pink fluffy clouds in the sky and lollipops everywhere. I don't know, something that was happy.
You know, right? What? Dreaming is good. Dreaming is good. Visualization is good. So, just finding a way to get into our happy space is what we all need to do sometimes, just to escape some of the drama and the madness that's going on around us in the world. And so before we bring Edy onto the show, just a little bit more about her. Edy Nathan is an author. She's also a public speaker, a licensed therapist, and she practices in New York City in the USA. As a survivor of abuse herself and with the experience of having lost a partner in her 20s, she very skillfully is able to use the art of storytelling to deal with sensitive topics such as grief, loss, and trauma. Edy is a psychotherapist as well as a grief therapist. And here's the interesting thing that we want to explore in our conversation with her. She says that grief could be an unexpected ally that allows people to grow and to learn from their losses. So let's get on to the show, shall we, and explore this topic a little bit more.
Absolutely.
Edy, hi, a warm welcome to the show. It's great to have you join us today.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we just want to warn everyone, again, a great warm welcome. It doesn't matter which social media channel you're watching us on. Edy is currently having really bad weather, and we hope that the internet connection is going to hold for the rest of the interview. So if Edy suddenly disappears off our screen, you know that it is the storm. It's not her not wanting to talk to us, right?
Oh, that's so right. Yes.
So how did you, how did you get into becoming an author? I always like to know that first of first of all, because we've all got stories within us, but somehow we don't get to all make that transition into writing our book. And especially this particular one on grief and loss and, death and dying and how do you deal with it. It's a heavy subject. It's a difficult subject. It's one that people don't know how to bring up. People don't know how to talk about it. They don't know how to express themselves. So how did you get to become an author, and how did you get to author this particular book, and who are you targeting with the book?
Sometimes a topic finds you, you don't find it. And the topic of grief found me. It wasn't until realizing that actually surviving bullying or sexual abuse and the trauma of abuse or losing a partner, the culmination of those three parts of my life would give me a voice around grief and loss, and realizing that we often, as humans, we want to avoid it. We want to avoid having this conversation. We want to avoid learning how to partner with it in such a way that it could actually teach us rather than take away from us. And so it found me because I needed to find a voice. I needed to heal. And this book was not my healing journey. It was after my healing journey of learning about how grief is an unexpected ally. And this book is part of the unexpected ally perspective, that had I not gone through those three very difficult, really life-changing traumas, hurts, losses, that I would not have been attracted to writing this book, or probably I wouldn't even be doing what I do as a therapist, as a public speaker. So it opened up a conversation, and the writing of it was a long period of time. Some writers say, oh, it came to me and I sat down and I wrote. This was a 10-year process. And the joke in my house is that I made a mark on the couch that I sat on as I wrote. And every time we look at that couch and we see that indentation, that's the writer's indentation. And it's a memory piece. It's let's remember where you've been, where you are now, and where you're going. And that's part of the grief conversation. It's a memory piece. It's let's remember.
Wow, I think that's really special, to be able to have something that is part of your family now. That's something, everyone will remember the couch was part of your journey to getting your story out. Something that you'll hold dear always. Who was it that, was your support system in writing? Because nobody can write something of this nature without having a champion to keep you going. Because obviously with writing, there's a process. Who was that person for you, and how did they help you get your story out?
It wasn't one person, because one person could help me with one aspect and another person could help me with another aspect. It really took a community. And I would say I had a community of three. I had my husband, who made sure that while I sat there for 12 hours at a time, I got fed, I got water, I got nourished. And he listened to bits and pieces of the work, of the process. And then my best friend, Lizanne, who is also a writer, and we would share ideas. And how does this sound? And how does that sound? And is this too broad? Or does it need a different language attached to the ideas? Because the ideas in the book, it's different than a lot of grief self-help books, in that it's not a, if you follow these 10 steps, you're going to be fine. And there's nothing like that in this book. It's actually, how are you going to learn about yourself? And then it was actually, this is going to sound strange, but conversations that I had with my mother, even though she was no longer alive. And I would listen to her, and she coached me, and she applauded, or she said, no, that shouldn't be in there. And I heard her voice. And that internalization is also part of this book, which is that just because someone is gone doesn't mean they leave your heart.
Right. It's funny how that works sometimes, I mean, I've experienced that so many times throughout the years, experiencing loss and grief, and keeping that person as a part of my life and helping allowing the memories to guide me in my decision making throughout this whole process has been absolutely phenomenal. Always trying to sort of imagine, if this person were here now, what would they tell me? How would they respond? How would they guide me? How would they comfort me in this particular position? One thing that a lot of people struggle with, and I think this is appropriate to talk about at this time, because we're dealing with loss and grief in such a different way. It's abnormal. It's not a normal way. We want to huddle together. We want to hug each other. We want to be together. We want to have long chats over long cups of coffee and tea and cookies and cream and all those kind of things. And we don't get to do that. Now, there's people deal with loss and grief in a different way, and some people are quite comfortable with talking about it, and other people resort to silence, because they don't know what to say. Do you have any advice for anyone who's stuck in that inability to talk about grief and loss?
There are many different ways, as you've so genuinely expressed, to dance with, to move with grief. And there's no one right way. No one grieves exactly the same way. Grief
Correct.
is like your fingerprint. So if you are having trouble speaking to it, it doesn't, just because you don't have the words, and sometimes we don't have the words for a feeling of trauma or aloneness, or the grief that just feels like it's overtaking us. You can write, and I'm not saying a journal per se, but even what we know is in terms of the brain, and your brain is your greatest ally in this. Because when the brain changes in a grief reaction, if you can change the cognition, change the thinking, like I can't do this, or I'm all alone, or no one understands, to begin to change some of those cognitive thoughts, like I'm not alone, I bet there's one person who could understand. Who might that person be? Or I need to name what I am going through. I feel like I can't concentrate. I'm not thinking straight. Is this, and identifying, is this a big G loss? And the way that the book describes grief and loss, it's not just for the loss of a loved one, it is also for the losses in life. We're in this place right now of a pandemic, and it is global, and we are experiencing losses on many different levels. And those different levels, some of which we don't have words for. We don't have words for the isolation and the grief of isolation. We don't have words for not being able to follow through with rituals like the funeral, like the rites of the funeral. And you were just talking about that. Like, we can't do the gatherings that we've done to honor a life. And how do we do that? How do we reach out? And if you're an introvert, that introversion makes it perhaps harder to speak about the loss or speak about what you're feeling. If that's the case, even as an introvert, there might be one person, or there might be an animal that you're close to. Just get the words out. Get the words out. And breath work can also be very, very helpful. I know that sounds funny, but we're breathing all the time. It's true. But when we grieve, oftentimes the breath is shallow. And so you're not really oxygenating the brain, you're not oxygenating the body. So taking in with intention breaths, deep breaths, and holding them and letting them go can actually help re-regulate the body and the brain.
That is so correct, because I think even unconsciously we sometimes simply forget to breathe. We get stuck in that moment, and if you actually can say to somebody, stop, take a breath, breathe, it's almost as if you're giving them permission to take that breath deep into their lungs and to stop that pattern where they're stuck in breathlessness. um, Tony's saying more than ever, our lives are a conscious dance with death as a possibility and reality. And that is true. That is true. We're currently living in uncertain times where nothing is guaranteed, just nothing. You're not guaranteed a job. You're not guaranteed tomorrow. You're not guaranteed tonight. Every minute, every day becomes a gift.
That's
And I
right.
think it's time for us to reshift, refocus, and realize what the important things in life are. I've always said to people, my motto has always been, don't sweat the small stuff. Um, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. When somebody dies, no one's going to care whether or not they wore short pants or long pants, or whether they liked their, milk in their tea or coffee, hot or warm. Nobody really cares about that. People care about how we treated each other. How did we treat our co-workers? How did we treat our family? What was our relationship with our creator? Those become the more important things in life, not the little stuff. And I think if we can become more cognizant of that in our day-to-day living, not to sweat the small stuff, to refocus, um, and think about the bigger things in life. In your life and your tragedy, who was it that, where did you get your strength from?
Strength is such an interesting concept. What is strength? What is it to have strength? It is perhaps where grief becomes your greatest teacher, that it is learning what you can go through. And it's like a hero's journey, right? You start out in a very ordinary place. And that ordinary place is, I'm going along, and then something happens and it takes you into that dark cave, and that dark cave feels so alone and alienating. And yet in the darkness, you meet parts of yourself you never knew existed. And those parts of yourself are your points of strength, your points of recognition, your points of saying, this is who I am, and this is who I am becoming as a result of this loss, as a result of these losses, as a result of facing that which I never thought I would be facing. And you take that learning, and it can almost feel biblical. It can almost feel larger than life. But you take those teachings, that which you have learned about yourself, and then you go back into your ordinary life forever changed. And this idea of strength is that it continues to renew itself. It continues to redefine itself. Every day, that first year of a loss is a day of firsts. It's a year of firsts. And that year of firsts, you don't know what the next day will hold. That second year is a year of awakenings. And in that year of awakenings, it's that place of, oh, so it's not going to change. I'm going to have to change myself. I'm going to have to do things differently. And I have a choice here. And making those choices informs your strength. So strength is magical. It is forever changing. And I grab my strength from support systems, from reading, from talking, sharing, hearing narratives, and finding new stories, because you're always creating a new story. Every day you are holding a new story and creating one.
I really like that. It's something that I do myself as well, and I encourage other people to do that. When you've had loss, um, it's good to talk about the experience. It's good to talk about the person that you've lost, because it allows those stories to come out. And the art of storytelling is therapeutic. It keeps that person alive. It keeps the memory of that person alive, and it allows you a safe space to express yourself. And I really like that. Instead of, because some people tend to sort of want to keep quiet and not talk about the person and almost pretend, that they didn't exist. I love to bring out the memories. I love to, we've got a ritual in our family where we have an album that's in the front porch of the house. And so every person that walks past will turn the page, will reflect on the picture that we've seen, and it's there. I don't believe that album should all be stuck away in a cupboard or a shelf. It needs to be there. And sadly, we've moved to a digital world where we don't always have that. But I love these photographs and just having them at hand and being able to reflect and think of that person, and just to talk about them every single day. I was very passionate about it when my children were young. For example, when my in-laws passed, I wanted them to remember their grandparents. And so we talked about them often. I'll find ways during the day to sort of say, this is what they would have done. This is what they would have said. And just to keep the conversation going, because it helps us process things in our mind and in our head. It helps us to process feelings. And the other thing I want to ask you about, Edy, is what are your thoughts around people saying, you spoke about strength earlier. Oftentimes I see people have a response to someone who's just lost a loved one, and they'll say to them, be strong. And I often think about that. What do you mean by being strong? Are you telling me I don't have permission to grieve? Are you telling me I don't have permission to feel the sense of loss? Why do I have to be strong? Do I not have permission to break down and cry? I have a strong sense to actually say to people, you don't have to be strong. It's not what it's about. If you feel like you need to grieve in the moment, then do that, and it's expressed in different ways. What is your response to that?
I completely agree with you. The journey is not about being strong. You become strong as a result of the journey. This is about allowing yourself to be in your grief, in your mourning, and whatever process that is for you, it is. And instead of be strong, how about, I don't know what to say. I don't know how I can help you, but I want you to know I'm here. I want you to know I see you. I want you to know that I'm going to bring you dinner. And if it's too much, you can tell me and I won't be hurt. I want you to know that though I don't know your pain, I can witness it with you. I can sit with you in it, in a dark room, in a light room, and I will care for you either in your presence or from afar.
I really like that. It's okay for you to actually say to someone, I don't know what to say, because I think that person will appreciate that a lot more than you being completely quiet, because it's easy for the person who's in the middle of grief to translate your silence as not caring. But if you actually said to the person, I don't know what to say to you, it means you've given thought about this. And you're actually saying to them, I care, I just don't know how to say it. And, what you said is absolutely right. If you can just be there, you don't have to talk. If you can bring them a meal, you can make them a cup of tea. It's the little things that matter. Send them a little text message saying, I'm thinking of you today. I don't know what to say to you, but just know that I'm thinking of you today. It's the little things that makes a huge difference. The other thing that I'm very passionate about is, as you also mentioned earlier, grief is not a one size fits all. There's no time limit to grief. There's no formula to grief. It's completely different for every single person. And whatever that looks like for you in your landscape, you need to understand that that is okay. it's okay for you to do it in your own space and time. And something that I also feel pretty strongly about is we tend to have this ritual, and I'm not sure where it started, but people tend to say, "I know what you feel like," when they've had a loss. And that, to me, loss is very subjective. And just by way of an example, I'd like to get your take on this. By way of example, when you lose someone significant, such as a parent or a spouse. Now, there's lots of people in the world that have lost parents and lost spouses, but the way that you feel about that loss and how you process that loss has got a lot of other factors other than who that person was in your life. You know, it depends on what the quality of your relationship with that person was like. Did you have a close relationship as a parent-child? Your relationship with your spouse, was that a great relationship? Was it an okay relationship? Was it whatever it was? But that is going to influence how you feel about your loss. And so no person can really, truly, honestly say, I know how you feel, because I don't. Even though you've also lost a spouse or a parent, your relationship with that person determines how you feel. What's your take on that?
Your relationship with with the parent or the person you lost, the loved one you lost, certainly can affect the way you grieve, the way you mourn. If you had a bad relationship with a parent and then they pass away, you may actually have a harder time with that loss, because what dies with them is the hope of making it better. What dies with them is your hope that you will maybe be able to repair it, that you will be able to do it differently. Now, that doesn't mean that, after a loss, you can't work on that relationship, even in the absence of that family member. And certainly if you disowned your parents or you disowned a loved one and said, I can't be with them, then if you were really at peace with that, again, you may be sad that they're not around anymore, or you may actually feel relieved. And again, there's no one right way or wrong way to feel about a loss. And actually, in the book, I have a very small chapter on if you are not mourning the loss of a loved one. And no one really talks about that. No one really talks about, oh, you know what? I'm not mourning this loss. I had a very tricky relationship with fill in the blanks. And so, but everybody has an expectation. And so then the person who lost that loved one almost has to fake it. And that makes it even harder, having to fake it.
Wow. That is quite an interesting dynamic. And let's be real, it does happen. We sometimes find ourselves, unfortunately, in situations where we may have been in an abusive relationship with someone, and the death of that person actually brings relief to your life.
That's right.
It's a whole different dynamic.
That's right. And no one talks about it. No one talks about it, and it's like a no-go zone. And it is those very no-go zones that if someone is a close member of someone who they know, they're a close relationship, a close friend, to someone who they know had a rough relationship with a beloved, or a member of a family, an abuser, instead of assuming that they feel badly, ask open-ended questions, not questions that will satisfy you as the inquisitor, but an open-ended question. How are you feeling about this? And I know that your relationship was strained. So not everybody grieves the same way. Grief is like your fingerprint. So what's going on for you? And I just want to, lend an ear and know that I'm there for you no matter what your experience is.
I like that. That's a very, that's a great takeaway from this conversation, is to learn the art of asking open-ended questions, and not to presuppose that you know how the person is feeling, or where they are at the grief stage, or that they need to justify how they are grieving, because it's so incredibly different for every single person depending on the situation. The same happens with a mom that's lost a baby, for example, either through abortion or natural or unnatural, or a stillborn. It's amazing how people can sometimes not take a breath and think before they say something. One of the things, for example, that I hear often is people will say, well, you can have another child. It's like saying, you can have another husband.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are things we need to just take a breath ourselves before we say something, because we're not sure how that may affect the person we're saying it to, that's already in a state of grief. The last thing we want to do is to say something that's going to make their pain worse. And I think the one take home for me from this period that we're living in right now, tying that into death, dying, and, because a lot of things that we knew before this pandemic is gone. It's dead, it's died. And so, as you rightly said in the beginning, we are mourning all kinds of things apart from just having lost loved ones in this pandemic, whether it's because of COVID or indirectly because of COVID. There's other things, the loss of freedom, the loss of jobs, so many things that we're currently mourning. And I think, my motto is consistently be kind. Be kind to each other, because we don't know what is going on for the next person. Just be kind. If somebody lashes out to you, you don't know what's behind that. That may have just been the tipping point for them. Edy, where can people find your book, and how can people connect with you?
My book is on Amazon, so that's where they can find the book. And they can connect with me through my website, edynathan.com. And if they mention that they heard me on this wonderful show, I will send them a free chapter of the book. And they will also get a free downloadable meditation. So this has been a wonderful conversation, and the journey is a lone journey, but it is also a journey of collaboration, and grief can be an unexpected ally, because you can grow from it and learn about yourself and become more as a result of it.
Absolutely. Edy, thank you so much for being a great guest and talking about a topic that's very, very necessary during these uncertain times that we're living in. Thanks for watching, everyone. Do remember to write good stuff, stay safe, and take care of yourself and your loved ones. And if you are struggling with grief, reach out to someone, talk to someone. Don't suffer by yourself. Take care and be safe, everyone.